Well, welcome back. I intend to share an observation that I made over the weekend. I was out with friends, and prior to arriving in this bar at London Bridge, I had made a comment to them about the purpose of dating from a man's perspective. Let's just say that in many ways there were different opinions, which obviously is very healthy. And I thought perhaps I should share some of the conversations that some of the comments I made and the observations that followed when we arrived at the bar, because in many ways I had explained some of my ideas and my principles or philosophies, and it wasn't necessarily accepted. But as soon as we walked into the bar, we observed in real time what some of the things that I had said before we arrived in the bar. I'll try to do 2 or 3 things today. The first will be to explain in very, very simple terms the purpose of dating from a man's perspective. I think this would be very, very useful, especially for ladies. But it would also, I guess, draw men to be a little bit more focused on the outcome that they want. The second thing would be to give a number of recommendations on how to think about dating, and then I'll draw some subtle conclusions. Let me start by, again, because this series is targeted towards men and for men, let me start by explaining the group that I'm primarily referring to. I've described 3 different groups which I will address over the sessions that follow, and who I have addressed in the prior sessions. The first group is what I call the preschool. I categorized the groups as though this were a school, and I'm giving a series of lectures. The preschool are those who are 18 years old or less. The second group are those who fall within the age of 18 all the way up to 35. That group is the main group for which most of what I share is intended. Now, the third group are those who are 35 and above. I understand that certain people will transition through the various groups at their own, obviously at their own pace. Whenever I'm referring to general advice, I'm specifically addressing those between 18 and 35. If I intend to make a direct commentary for the first or the third group, I'll do my best to be very specific. So when I refer to the purpose of dating, I'm primarily referring to the second group, although this extends to the third group, and this might include people who are in the first group. In any case, I'm speaking to adult males. Now, you've heard the statement, love and war. Love and war. You've also heard the statement, fair play. Now, let's put aside the first group and let's focus on the second and the third group. Generally, when you're dating and you're between 18 and 35, there's a principle that applies. The principle is that all is fair in love and war. For the third group, the principle that applies is the principle of fair play. What I call the silver rule. Do not do unto others what you do not wish that they would do unto you. Not the golden rule, the silver rule. So keep this in mind. Now, if I'm speaking to, which I am, to the second group between 18 and 35, and I'm saying keep in mind the purpose of dating should align with the principle of all is fair in love and war. Now, let me describe this statement from a man's perspective and also from a female's perspective. So you can see it's not a moral statement. Again, I'm not dealing with morality. I'm dealing with outcomes. Every man should, if they are in the dating scene, seek to get as much free sexual encounters as they can for the least amount of resources. That is what every man is intending to do. In other words, Milton Friedman talked about the idea that the best things in life are free. So you should be looking to get things for free. Now, the statement about all is fair in love and war is to say principally sex is war, especially in modern day. Sex is war. And if it is war, then there are no rules for you to obtain victory. And a man calculates victory when he gets to shag or when he gets laid. Very, very simple principle. Again, between 18 and 35. And if you're following the principles that I have shared, in which I have said 95% of your time should be focused on your goals, your dreams, your vision. If you're still studying, your education. If you're working, work. You should be focused on, in principle, increasing the likelihood of you becoming financially independent, financially free and wealthy. That should be your focus. 5% of that time should be on interactions with women. 5%. And that simply means that you have a limited amount of time to sacrifice for the pursuit or towards the pursuit of sex. And the mantra should be by any means necessary, providing it falls within the code of the dating scene. You've heard me say before that dating is false advertising. Everything is false because everyone is trying to present their best self. People exaggerate, people lie, people have, and in many cases, apply the direct intention to deceive in order to get what they want. And once they've achieved that, they backtrack and bring forward their actual and real self. I have no issues with that. And that simply means that both men and women are playing a game of who gets to win. So for men, you want to get as much ass as you can and spend as little as you can. For women, the principle applies equally. You want to get as much resources and openings and favors as you can, but you want to give up as little as possible. Because what you have is what the man wants. And if his mindset is to get it for free, your mindset should be to get as much as you can and as much as you can also give very little up. Now what this simply means is that dating is simply, in many ways, it can be a positive sum game, but in many ways it's a negative sum game. One person wins and the other loses, especially in the arts of love and war. Now keep that aside and let me come down to today's conversation. We walked into a restaurant, a bar restaurant. It's a bit, somewhat of a mix. And we sat there, we ordered, and we were talking. About an hour later, one of the people on the table made an observation. They said, the couple next to us, who were there before we arrived, and who I noticed were having, I have to say, were having a great time. They had placed an order for their food, but they hadn't actually touched the food an hour after we arrived. Their food had arrived just at the same time that we arrived at the cafe, at the restaurant. And as we left, this is roughly maybe 90 minutes after we arrived, they hadn't actually touched their meal. Now, I will say that they were having very, very, very good banter. They were having a good time. They were interacting. Now, we all individually agreed that it was perhaps a first date. It seemed that way. Obviously, we eavesdropped and we could hear the conversations because they were right next to our table. We left. And one of the people in the group said, I don't understand. You know, how can two people come to a restaurant, order? Now, bear in mind that the prices were not really cheap. It's quite an expensive place. And the comment was, well, the food is cold, and I don't think they intend to eat the food. And it validated something that I had said earlier on before we arrived at the cafe. So I said, well, you see, this validates the conversation that we had and the comment that I made earlier. Now, here is the comment. In relation to men, if a man, and this is perhaps very, very important for ladies, if a man asks or was to ask you out, we have already in our minds decided that we would like to see you naked. But we want something more than seeing you naked. Because if it were just to see you naked or semi-naked, we could simply take you to a pool or someplace. What it means is that we have decided that we would like to sleep with you. We want to shag. That decision is made at the moment we see you, especially if you fit into our type. Or we want to see you naked with the intention of knowing whether we would like to go ahead with any sexual interaction. Now, what this simply means is that when a man asks a woman out, the purpose of the date is to give the woman the opportunity for him to audition for her approval for sex. Now, let me say that again, maybe slightly slower. When a man meets a woman, if he finds her attractive, he has decided already that he would like to see her naked and he would like to shag. He would like to have sex with her if he finds her attractive. If he asks you out, the purpose of the date is not for him. It's not to find out, your family, your friends, what you like, how you dress, the parties you've been to in the past, where you've traveled to, your previous boyfriends, your relationships. We do not care about any of that. Whilst we're sitting next to you or in front of you on a date, all we are thinking is you're naked. I can't wait to see you naked. And that also means that whatever you say to us before sex means nothing to us, because we take things seriously once we've had an opportunity to sample the goods. That also means that whatever he says prior to sleeping with you, you should take it with a pinch of salt, because we will say anything to seal the deal, which goes back to the principle of all is fair in love and war. What do you do? He exaggerates. Where do you live? He exaggerates. Everything he's saying is directly proportionate to what he believes you want to hear in order for you to grant him access. Generally speaking, we don't really care what we say if we really, really want to shag you. Now, the point I'm making with all of this is to say this. The couple sitting next to us were having a great time. Great banter. They were laughing. They were having a great time. We could see, and we concluded that was a good date. And that validates the point I want to make in today's session, which has to do with what men should spend for dates and on dates. Now I would, although I didn't stay to make the observation, I would believe that the guy paid for the date. There's a possibility they went Dutch, but he looked like a gentleman. Whether he went half or he went full, there was an expense for which he did not benefit by eating the food. So here is the point of today's session. Men should spend as little as possible on dates. And let me perhaps explain the purpose of this. Between the age of 18 and 35, all of your time, all of your energy, all of your focus should be on your goals, your dreams, your vision, making yourself your best self, trying to get yourself to financial freedom and wealthy as fast as you can. And that simply means that every little penny counts. As a rule of thumb, my recommendation is for you to never spend more than £30 on a date. Preferably, your first date should not be in a restaurant. Your first date, bearing in mind that you're giving the woman the opportunity to audition, or rather you're auditioning for her affection and her intimacy, you should minimize what you spend. £30 should be the max. Now, I understand that £30 is not a lot of money, but I'll try to explain why I've used this number. But there are places that you can find where you can have a meal, if you choose to, for less than £30. My preference, however, is for you to spend, generally speaking, no more than 30 minutes on a first date. There is no need for more than 30 minutes. Now let me go back so you can understand how this has come about. I explained that if 95% of your time should be spent on your work and your vision, then that leaves you roughly 5% for sexual encounters and for women. That amounts to roughly 2.5 hours maximum every single week. Maximum 2.5 hours every week. That's the maximum amount of time between 18 years old and 35 that you should spend on women on the aggregate. The rest of the time you should be spending at least 10 hours working, minimum 10 hours. You have 8 hours to sleep every day. The time in between should be about your personal development and networking. Every week, no more than 2.5 hours on dates, on interaction, and even quality time with women. Minimize the time you spend, because in that period of your life, the value of your time is so important, because that's the seed that you sow into good soil to ensure you have a harvest sometime in the future. Now, if 2.5 hours is the maximum amount of time you can spend, that means your dates should be kept to the minimum, no more than half an hour. And that means my preference is not to go to restaurants because they're expensive. You should go to coffee bars, you should go to markets, you should go for walks in the park. Minimize what you spend. Because if a woman wants to sleep with you, if a girl has decided that she's going to shag you, she doesn't need you to spend money on her. And the funny thing is, most women will acknowledge that if they find you attractive, they have already mentally decided that they will sleep with you. Now, any woman who says that my advice is too cheap and that they will not accept a date except the person is looking to treat her to something, let's say luxurious and something fancy, then it means in principle she's saying she's a prostitute, because she's saying that she is equating the value of what you spend to her decision to have sex with you, which is what a prostitute does. Effectively, you're exchanging money for sex or some form of currency. That could be food, That could be an experience, that could be drinks. There shouldn't be a price because it's a mutual exchange. In many ways, let me put it in a very different way, the way I used to do things back in the day. If I asked you out on a date, I was in principle paying for your time. If this is an equal world, you are paying for my time because it's meant to be a mutual exchange. You pay for my time and I'm paying for your time. However, usually my time is of more value depending on the woman you're asking out. Again, depending. If she's younger than you are and if you're earning much more than she is, the man's time is more valuable. But let's just simply say they're equal. My position was to spend back in the day no more than £25 or £30 maximum if I chose to take you out. And in principle, I was simply trying to audition for the opportunity for you to accept me. So it didn't really matter what I spent. If I had to spend and buy bottles of champagne in order for you to open up your legs, then something was wrong. In other words, it's like prostitution. You're trying to sell yourself to the highest bidder, for which, again, between 18 and 35, men should pay the least as they can, as little as possible, and aim to get as much as they can. So your word game at the younger age should be all you have, because you have no resources. So you want to minimize your spend, minimize your bleed between 18 and 35. Now here is, in many ways, the major reason for all of this advice. Over the Christmas period, I spent some time with people of different age groups and men of different age groups, and I was perplexed at the amount of money young men, some of whom are still in universities, how much they spend on dates. In some instances, what some people spend on dates exceeds what I spend, as you might say, as a family, as a monthly spend on general upkeep, not upkeep, groceries and food, etc. They spend more, sometimes in a week, than I spend in a month. And I couldn't understand why. In many ways, some of them felt that they were guilted into going to the best restaurants before the girl would give them attention. Again, I go back to the point of prostitution. If you're selling yourself to the highest bidder, then you're ipso facto a prostitute. In any case, I noticed that so much was being spent, and I use this analogy, and this is perhaps at the heart of today's conversation. Let's, for the sake of argument, say you spend £50 per week on dates, and this is not unusual for men between 18 and 35. £50 per week, assuming 50 weeks per year. We'll assume 4 weeks in the entire year, allowance for Christmas, Easter, some of the other, festive holidays. We say 50 weeks you're out on dates, or 50 times in a year. So 50 dates in a year, for which you spend £50 per date. That would mean in an entire year, you would have spent 2,500. And let me put that into perspective. If you spend £2,500 annually over an 18-year period, between 18 years and 35 years, that amounts to roughly, if the numbers serve me right, I'm trying to do this in my head now, if the numbers serve me right, that amounts to roughly £45,000. That is more than you need for a deposit for a house. So I explained to my friends that one of the reasons I recommend to young men to stop spending money on dates is because if you were intelligent with your finances, by the time you were 35, taking into account that the average salary in the UK is roughly £28,000, and If you were looking to buy a home, the average home in the UK is roughly £290,000. All you would need is between 5% and 10% for a deposit for a house. That means just from dates, by the time you were 30 years old, if you kept every single penny that you should have spent on dates, if you kept all of that, you would have enough money to have bought 2 homes by the time you're 30 years old. Now that is huge. So in many ways, every date, you're simply pissing out your opportunity to become wealthy or to create a fortune or to buy your first home. Now the average age for people buying their first homes without the help of their parents in the UK, without the help of their parents, is roughly 40 years. Can you see the reason? Now, this is correlation, this is not causation. This simply means that we're pissing out our wealth one dinner date at a time. So the key thing here is to say, I want you to maximize your potential. Achieve that dream or goal first before you start spending money on dates. Now let me try and move to something else that I think will be relevant. I am of the view that you should spend as little as you can on dates. Again, £30 should be the maximum. But there should be rules. In today's current day and age, with the use of social media, with the use of all the platforms we have, the cost of sex has become a commodity. And commodities, in principle, are priced based on demand and supply. Unfortunately, there is an oversupply of supply, which means the cost of sex has reduced in many ways, partly due to the feminist movement, the liberation movement, the womanist movement. For example, Bumble was created by a woman. Tinder, I think it's Match.com. These are all apps that have reduced, in many ways we've democratized the sexual marketplace to the point where the cost of sex today is zero. So keep this in mind. When you spend £30 on a date, you're in principle paying 30 times the asking price. Because today, all you have to do is swipe left or swipe right. When there's a match, that's an indication of attraction. If a conversation begins, it means the person has had the opportunity for you to audition. They can look at your photographs, they can ask you questions. You haven't spent a dime. These apps are free. So today, some of these apps, this is not something funny, but some of these apps have options whereby if you match on a date, you can send an Uber to the person, or the person can send an Uber to you. Which means the cost of dating or the cost of sex is simply an Uber ride away, give or take £10 or less. In many cases, they will prefer to actually pay their way to see you. You know, you swipe left, you swipe right, you have a conversation, you ask, would you like to come over? Yes. Now people are having sex today before they go on dates. So if you're playing the traditional gentlemanly role with chivalry, you're playing a losing game. Because in today's day and age, women today are using dates as opportunities to simply have a good time. Now there are some who pay their way, but most of the time the man picks up the tab. And my point is, if you did that for 50 times in a year, spend £50, and you were stupid enough to do that for the next 18 years, you would have pissed out the opportunity to have paid a down payment and bought 2 homes in the UK for the average homes. So keep that in mind. Each date has to be viewed from the lens of a business transaction. Again, between 18 and 35, all is fair in love and war. Women have asked for the liberation and the emancipation of women, which means back in the day, the cost of a virgin was that you had to pay a dowry. You had to go and seek for a hand in marriage. Today, the cost of sex is zero. If you're paying £50 for a date, you're overpaying by a factor of 50 times. Now, 50 times, just in case you're not aware of what that means in percentage terms, is 5,000%. That's what you're paying. Now, here are some rules. For whatever reason, when you go on the first date, again, you're giving her the opportunity to confirm whether she finds you attractive and if sex is on the table. If you pay for the first date, if there is a second date, and this is my preference, is for you guys to go Dutch, go half, 50-50, everyone pays for theirs. If she accepts the date, then it's 50-50. I know women who go on dates every day of the week simply to get free meals. And you might be thinking, these are not high-class women. No, these are very attractive women, and men are willing to pay for their time. The point being, minimize your spend and your bleed. If you pay for the first date, she pays for the second date. By the third date, both of you should have had enough time to decide on whether you consummate the whole dating process. In which case, all I'm simply saying is that if she is not forthcoming by the third date, just move on. You know, there's no need dating and going on 10 different dates and paying for 10 different dates when the cost of sex is zero today. Simply move on. Again, the purpose of a date for men is to shag. We're not trying to get to know whether she likes poetry, what her plans for the future are. All we're thinking is, how do I get from where I am now to where I want to be, which is with you sexually. So keep those ideas in mind. Now let me, I guess, conclude by saying perhaps 2 or 3 other things. You heard me talk about minimizing your spend. Let me advise on something else. Rather than spend money on dates every month, assuming that you have saved all that you would have spent on dates, every month, take out roughly about £30, which is the cost of one date. And a man who is older than you, who is more accomplished than you, who is perhaps maybe between 5 and 10 years older than you, take them out for coffee. And if you can, offer them the opportunity to take them out for a meal. Now here's the reason. And this is perhaps, this connects everything I've shared so far today. More than 99% of the time, all of the sexual encounters you have, all of the dates, all of the interactions you have with female companions between the age of 18 and 35 will amount to nothing from the sense or from the perspective of a life partner. Very few people end up with the people they've met in that age cohort. Very few end up with them as husbands and wives. So if you were to look back, assuming you're over 35, if you were to look back at your life and ask yourself a simple question. Now I did this with the friends, the people on over the weekend. I said, well, look back at all of the encounters you had, all the dates, all the drinks you went out for, all the dance parties, all the interactions, and even the sexual encounters you had with people between 18 and 35. Where are all of those people? And in the large part, everyone said, I didn't end up with that person. And what that simply means is that you shouldn't have any feeling. There should be no feelings towards minimizing your spend, because most of the time, those relationships, especially for men, end up nowhere. The beautiful lady, the gorgeous girl, ends up with someone else. She probably never remembers the date. 20 years from now, 10 years from now. It's a distant memory. So whether you spend on champagne and a 5-course meal, in a few years, it's all forgotten. However, the cost you spent, the money you spent, those are seeds for your wealth. On the other hand, and there is always an other hand, for men between the age of 18 and 35, the best male bonding relationships you would ever forge will occur in that period. So the people you form as friends end up being your friends for a lifetime, especially if you stay in the same town. The people you meet end up being part of your life in the future. There's a strong bond between men. Your wealth will not come from a woman. The inspiration to create wealth might come from a woman, but your wealth will always come from your friends, the pact, the influence you have around you. My recommendation is this, and I did this, and I've done this so many times. You want to always have male friends who are 5 to 10 years older than you are. So for example, let's say you're 18. You need to have amongst your friend group at least 30 to 40% of your friends or your inner circle should be men who are older than you, because they have more wisdom, they've seen more, they have more experience, and in many cases they will create and provide to you opportunity for wealth much more than people in your age group. So at 18, roughly 40% of your friends should be between the age, if you can. This is not quite easy, but at 18, you're looking to 5 years to 10 years older than you are. So say between 23 and 28. As you move up, you want to try and increase that number. I remember once I took someone out for coffee. In the conversation we had, I got introduced not just to ideas, but to opportunities for investing that I never would have got from my friends or people in my age group. So you always want to spend some little money to try and attract people who know much more than you, people whose lives you wouldn't mind leading, people who have connections, people who have wealth, people who have wisdom, so that you can, in many ways, stand on their shoulders based on their experiences. So once a month, if you can, take £30 and ask one of the male friends you have, senior friends you have, if you can take them out for coffee or for a meal. Men remember such memories. If you were to take a woman out to a nice restaurant, and let's say you spend £50, that could be the only £50 that you have in your savings. To the woman, that restaurant may not be good enough. Your best is seldom good enough for most women. Whereas if you took a man out and you said to him, listen, I have £30. I'd like to spend this £30 on you. If he believes your words, he would always remember that you took him to a good restaurant. Personally, I have my best friend. Nothing gives him more joy than taking me out. And nothing gives me more joy than going out with him and taking him out. The last time he took me we went to a restaurant in Mayfair. And when we sat down, he had made the preparations, he had placed the order, so we arrived. And I looked at the menu and I said, I can't believe you're spending this much on me. And his response was, it's a joy. And I said to him, this is something you should be spending on your missus. You take the missus out. And he said, no. This is bromance. This is not time for romance. This is time for bromance. This is time for us to bond, discuss business, discuss life issues, share our heart's desires, talk about the problems we're facing, brainstorm on solutions, and in many ways, the price of the meal paled in comparison to the value of my time and his time. That was much more. For him, it was an investment. So keep that in mind. If you're going to spend money, should you decide to spend money on social gatherings and social interactions, spend those on guys. But also, if you're spending that on men, again, I said coffee and I said a meal. Do not buy drinks. Stop spending money when you go out with your friends, male friends. Stop spending money on alcohol. It's pointless. It's useless. Go out for meals, sit down, remain sober, and have a conversation. Ideas will pop out from that interaction that will blow your mind. Now let me bring today's session all together and see if I can summarize what I hope I've been trying to say. In many ways, the dating scene is not what it used to be. There was a time when if you were dating someone, or if you asked someone out, they were not simultaneously dating other people or accepting invitations from other people. There was some, I would imagine, level of respect, decorum that existed, where someone would say to you, someone else is in my life. I'm seeing someone else. Today, people are dating, and especially women are dating openly, and rightly so. Again, between 18 and 35, I should say this. The same principle applies to women. Everything I've shared so far, if you invert it, the advice applies to women with some subtle modification to suit the female nature. But the point I'm making is that dating is not what it used to be. Things have changed, and therefore, the motto you should have is that all is fair in love and war between the age of 18 and 35. Now, once you've gone past 35, you bought a few homes, you've reached your goals, you're making good money, you're in a good place mentally, spiritually, physically, the game changes, and it should change depending on whether you're looking to settle down or looking to continue dating. If beyond 35 you intend to keep dating, the principle applies. If you decided that you would like to settle down, the principle of the silver rule comes into play. The principle of fair play. Not doing unto others what you would not wish that they would do unto you. Different game. But keep that in mind. Let me summarize. The purpose of dating for men is to shag. That's the purpose. We're looking to have sex. In many ways, if we ask you out, we've decided that we want to sleep with you. We're now auditioning for the opportunity for you to accept our interest. So that means for a man, you want to spend as little as possible and get the most amount of sex as you can. That also means you want to minimize what you spend on dates, preferably coffee bars, go out for walks, go to markets, go to galleries, do things that are free. In London, there is a wealth of things you can do that are very entertaining, very romantic, that don't cost money. Quite frankly, I have to say, even at the best restaurants, in probably about 6 out of 10, in the best restaurants, 6 out of 10 restaurants when I go out, I'm somewhat disappointed. The service isn't great, the food is not exceptional, the presentation is not memorable. So what you're paying for and what you're receiving less in value than what you pay in price. So minimize restaurants, minimize going out on dates. And here is perhaps something I should say that is key. If 95% of your time should be spent on your vision, your purpose, your goals, education, your dreams, becoming the best part of yourself, that means that Monday till Sunday, 7 days in a week. The mistake most men make, and here is where I will try and reverse your thought process. We work Monday till Friday and we party Saturdays and Sundays. We try to do dates on Saturdays and Sundays. If you're working 10 hours every day, and in my opinion, you should be working 60 hours a week, which means you're working Monday till Saturday. That leaves you with perhaps 1 day in the week for play. You do not want to dedicate a weekend for girls. The weekend is for boys. Interaction, networking, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. If you have an interest in a girl, Mondays and Tuesdays, for 2 reasons. Number one, the way the hospitality industry works, from Thursday till Sunday is where they make the most money, weekends being the highest point. Mondays and Tuesdays, they have a drop-off in attendance, and usually you tend to find that they have concessions or offers. The same meal, the same restaurant, made by the same chef, on a weekend will cost you £100 per person. On a Monday or on a Tuesday, you can get the same meal for half price. So think like an investor. Think about saving. That means Monday, Tuesday is when you dedicate to the woman. And that also suggests to her that you're busy. Weekends for your dreams, for your goals, and for your boys. Weekends is for you. Now, with all of that, keep in mind, you want to save as much as you can between 18 and 35. Now, I gave you a simple analogy of saving £50 per week over an 18-year period, assuming 50 days per year, and I said that would amount to 45,000. I'll leave it to you to estimate what would have happened if you taken that £50 and you invested that £50 every week in an index fund, in an investment index fund, stock index fund, over an 18-year period. I'd like you to go and do some research, and you'll be stunned at how much that money would have compounded over that 30-year period. In a low-cost index fund, over an 18-year period, compounding every month with the dividends reinvested, you'll be stunned. So £45,000 is what we'll call the savings, assuming no investment and no reinvestment. If you were to reinvest that amount every month, you'll be stunned by how much that amounts to. So you see, keep in mind that between 18 and 35, you really have no wealth except you've inherited money. Between 35 and above, that's when you start building wealth. So minimize trying to impress women when you're still quite young. The focus should simply be about your future. Think about yourself. Be as selfish as you can. Be nice. When the opportunity comes, treat women well. But remember, if you have to trade more money for the opportunity for sex, you're dealing with a prostitute.